What do you want? What? Okay, all right. We got one honest guy in the house. He wants some Jesus. But I guarantee you that something came to mind, and if you're less spiritual than that person, it was a thing, or it was a person, or it was a relationship. Maybe it was a new car, a new job, new opportunity, new scene, new setup. Maybe you're looking for some new friendships, new people in your life, or maybe you're like, man, I'm ready for some world peace up in here. Whatever it was, I believe that everyone in here can answer that question. Everyone in here has something that they want. Everybody wants something. So what do you want? What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to talk about when you're gone? What do you want your kids, the kids that you're raising under your roof with your resources, you're extending compassion and care to them? What do you want them to say about their experience in your home? Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, however many years, however high you can count? Where do you want to be? What do you want? This seems like a relatively simple question, but I think it is tough. It is real tough to answer. And if you don't believe me on this, where my parents at in the house? Anybody with toddlers? I dare you. If you think this is an easy question, I dare you to ask a toddler, because they will blow your mind. I thought that was going to play with y'all, but geez. First service has a better sense of humor. Anyways, this is a challenging question, and here's why. What we want now, it's not always what we want later. Can we amen that at least? What we want now is not always what we want later. And maybe you've been there where you got exactly what you thought you wanted, only to discover that later it wasn't what you wanted at all. You been there before? I've been there, and if you don't remember, Christmas was a little over a month away. I guarantee you some of the people that you're doing life with were there because they wanted something and they got it, and now a month out they want something else. They've already made the transition to what they thought they wanted to what they want now. And here's what we did around Christmas time. I like to take my kids out shopping for the misses. And so we all saddled up in the minivan and we went to the mall, and I got three young people with me, and they're brilliant and they're bright, and they got a lot of road ahead of them. The future's bright for them. And we went out on a mission. Our mission was to find a special something for mom. And I don't know why they always go there, but every year they're like, Mom needs perfume. I'm like, look guys, she smells good, okay? But anyways, that's where they go every time. So I find myself in perfume mania. Anybody else ever been there? All right, yeah, my man there's been there. So I'm in perfume mania, and I've learned a bit about fragrances over the years, because we end up in the fragrance section somewhere every year at Christmas time. But this was next level. So I got this lady, she broke it down into 2 categories, and one of them was like fresh, and the other one was sweet. And by the end of it, I feel like I had smelled so many different perfumes, my head was gonna explode. And it came down to the which one do you want moment. And my oldest, she's like, that's the one we want. Like, that's the one, Dad. That is the one. And I'm like, that's the one? She's like, yep, that's the one. So I pay the lady, and she tags on at the end, by the way, this is non-refundable. You can't bring this back. Once you do it, you do it. And So 2 things are going through my head. One is, that's weird. I don't really like that. The other one is, yes, like this shopping spree is done. Christmas shopping is over. We're going home. Little to my surprise, my kids, as we're walking out of the mall, they're like, we don't even know why we did that, Dad. And I'm like, what? They're like, we shouldn't have done that. She's not going to like it. She's going to hate it. And I'm like, I'm kind of trudging and trying to coach him through life. Like, hey, it's okay. And in the back of my mind, like, she's your mom. You could give her a rock and she'll like it. But I'm not really going to say that to you because that'll crush you, whatever. And then I hear the bag hit the pavement, and they're like, we shouldn't have done it. And I'm like, hold up, like this is non-refundable, non-retractable. We made the move and we got to stick to it. Anyways, we pick it up, and I'm like talking them through this, and we wrap it, we put it under the tree, and it works out just how I thought it would. She loved it. But what happened there was what they wanted then wasn't what they wanted in the immediate. It wasn't what they wanted later. And so that's what I want to talk to you about, because I'm convinced that you want something now, and the challenge is it might not be what you want later. And what that's called ultimately is regret. And in case you were looking for a working definition on regret, I'm going to give you one. And you can write this down if you want to, but regret is getting what you wanted and not having what you want. Regret is getting what you wanted and not having what you want, because what we want now is not always what we want later. So what do you want it's a tough question. It's a doozy, because what ends up happening is we never just answer the question. We never just say what we want, because somewhere in the background, we're building expectations for that something or that someone that we want. And ultimately, those expectations are the why behind the what when we answer the question, what do we want? And here's one of my core struggles. Maybe it's one of yours. I have a hard time sometimes coming up with reasonable expectations for things and for people. So I'll just say it. I'll clear the air. It's okay to want things. It's okay to want something. It's okay to want to be in a relationship. But what's not okay is expecting anyone or anything to be responsible for your personal satisfaction. So you can want what you want, but don't expect for that thing or that person to be responsible for your personal satisfaction. So our challenge to me, it's not that we want too much. We want too much. We expect too much out of what we want. And that's where the tension lies. And very rarely, on occasion they might, but very rarely do our expectations match reality. And what I'm really, really getting at here is that our wants, every single one of our wants, they come with expectations. We never just want something. We never just want to be in a relationship, or we never just want to have something for the sake of having it. I mean, maybe that's where you're at, but that's not where I'm at. I don't own anything that I just own just for the sake of owning it. Generally, I have things because I believe that they add value to my life, or I want to get something out of the something that I want. And here's how this plays out, and this can become extremely cyclical in our lives if we're not careful. And this is what I refer to as the want cycle. And here's how it plays out. We want something. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a someone, could be a relationship, could be an opportunity, could be a new job, new car. We want something because of the perceived benefit. And so out the gate, we have this amazing ability to zoom in on all the positive aspects of that something. So like if it's the new car, it's all the bells and whistles and the new car smell. And if it's a person, it's like these personality traits that you just think are so amazing, and you're head over heels about how laid back he or she is, and you're just into what you think is going to benefit you on some level, and then boom, it or they turn out to be far less desirable than you expected, and then we move on and we start wanting someone or something else. That's the want cycle, because wants lead to expectations, and when expectations go unmet, we start wanting someone or something else. You tracking with me? This is the want cycle. And then we push repeat, and it continues endlessly until something interrupts it. So when you were dating, maybe this is where you were at, when you were dating, I'll just go there. You were like, wow, he's so laid back. It's so amazing to be with someone so laid back, stress-free, no pressure. All right, now that you're married and you have kids, you're like, homeboy, you need to turn it on. Like laid back seems more like lazy to me, and carefree seems more like careless. Get off the couch and let's get going. You are finished. You are finished with laid back Larry, and you're looking for go-getter Greg. And yes, I changed the names to protect the innocent in this scenario. You had no idea that chill was code name for careless, and that laid back was just a super cool way, a trendy way to say lazy. You got what you wanted, but you don't have what you want, right? And it's all because of unmet expectations. You had expectations that were unmet. And so it's amazing what we focus on when we're at the beginning of what I call the want cycle. But as soon as the people or the things or the career or the opportunity doesn't live up to our expectations, that they don't deliver the level of satisfaction that we were convinced that they would, we realize that what we wanted then is not what we wanted now, because our wants always come with expectations, and when our expectations go unmet, it just causes tension. It causes tension. And so I have a question, and the question is this: what if we could break that cycle? What if somehow, some way, we could get what we really want? What if there was a way to stop wanting for things that just leave you with regret? And remember, regret is getting what you wanted and not having what you ultimately want. And so if that's where you're at, if you're ready to move forward away from regret and start living differently, start making better decisions, I think that I got something for you. And the something I got for you, it's right from a book of the Bible, which is not really a book. It's a letter written by a person by the name of James. And we're going to take a peek at chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 of this letter. And this letter's found in the New Testament, for those of us that are trying to figure out where that is. And I believe that James gives us some insight into the want cycle. And just so you know a little bit about James, James was Jesus' little brother. He had front row seats to the things that Jesus said and the things that Jesus did. And here's one thing that James struggled with that makes him highly relatable to people like you and I. Out the gate, he was really, really skeptical about Jesus. And in fact, there was a point in his life where he thought big bro Jesus was 2 fries short of a Happy Meal. He wasn't into what Jesus was saying, but then something changes. He makes a transition, and the something that changed everything for James is when Jesus rose from the dead. And then James has this mind shift, this perspective shift. Everything changes for him. He becomes a pastor in the church during the first century, and he writes this letter that we find in our New Testament. We refer to it as the book of James, but it's really a letter, and it's written to people. And I believe because of James' experience, because of his relationship with Jesus, he has some insight that's valuable to us. Think of it like this. If there was somebody that you followed on social media and you were just into them, and then it came out that someone that had an insider perspective on their life was going to write something about them, wouldn't you want to read the blog or see what the tweet said or visit the Facebook page? That's kind of what James' letter is like for us. It's an insider perspective into the life of someone who had an intimate relationship with Jesus. Now turn to me in James chapter 4 and check out what James has to say in verse 1. He says, "What causes fights and quarrels among you?" And what he's asking is, where do you think all the tension in your life comes from? Where do you think the tension in your marriage, the tension with your kids, the tension relationally between you and whoever, where do you think that comes from? And then he goes on to say, doesn't it come from your desires that battle within you? Look, conflict in our lives doesn't just happen. James is telling us, here's where it comes from. It comes from you and I not getting what we want. Amen? You been there before? It comes from us not getting what we want. It comes from unmet expectations, and the byproduct of unmet expectations every single time when we don't get what we want, it's tension. And so I asked you earlier, what do you want? And you probably went to some surface level question or surface level answer based on where you're at in life. And so if you're older, you're probably less focused on what, specifically. It's probably not a tangible good or a material good. Maybe it's relational. But if you're younger, you were probably like, I'm trying to get a car, I'm trying to get up out this basement, I'm trying to get a job, I'm trying to get into that school. And so for you, it's a little different. But I think there are 2 levels of answer to this question. You can go surface level, or you can do a little bit of deep digging and go under the surface and start answering the question of what you want. And that's a different kind of answer. And it's more challenging to do. It takes vulnerability and honesty. And so, since this can be a hard thing to do, I'm going to take one for the team, and I'm going to admit some things, and I'm going to invite you to admit them with me. If you can relate to these, relate to them. If you can relate these to somebody else, be careful. All right? And please don't do that here. Like, take that somewhere else. I'm not giving you these so you have fodder for the fire that's already in your relationships. Be careful. But I'm gonna admit some things. And the first thing that I'm gonna admit, and I'm gonna admit it for us at this point, we want our own way. We want our own way. And I can guarantee you this. I can guarantee you this about this one. If you consistently, constantly insist on getting your own way, you are never going to get what you really want. You want your own way. I want my own way. My kids want their own way. We want our own way. If you get your way every single time, you're going to end up getting in your own way. If you get what you want first, you end up forfeiting what you want in the future. Look, nobody likes the guy who always got his way. I mean, all of us, I guarantee you somebody came to mind, somebody that you worked with, they were on your team, and in the back of your mind, you were like, you selfish. However you filled in that blank. I didn't use an expletive, just saying. Maybe you did. But nobody likes that guy. You don't like being at the water cooler with them or in the lunchroom with them. You don't want him on your team. You don't like the guy that always got what he wanted. But here's the risk that we run. We want our own way, and if we always get our own way, we become the person that we don't want to become. When we always get our own way, we end up ultimately getting in our own way. So here's another one. Maybe you can relate to this one. We want to be satisfied. Is there anyone, before I go further, is there anyone here that doesn't want to be satisfied? Okay. Talking to the right people. Look, we want satisfaction. We want pleasure. This might be physical. It could be sexual. It could be emotional. It could be psychological. We want to be pleased. We want things that feel good. We want to feel good. And whether you're seeking satisfaction through food or sex or entertainment or things that you can own or things that you can do or adventure or an adrenaline rush, whatever it may be, when we want to feel good, we want to feel pleasure, know this, that very easily we can turn a good thing into a bad thing, even if it's legal. Even if it's legal. Now, if you're doing something illegal, that's a whole nother story. But we can turn a legally good thing into a bad thing because too much of a good thing quickly becomes a bad thing. And the things that we were turning to for satisfaction, eventually they don't satisfy. They don't deliver the same level of pleasure. Look, I'll just say it like this. You're always going to wish you never started yesterday what you can't stop today. You're always going to wish you never started yesterday what you know you can't stop today. And if that's where you're at, here's where you're really at. What used to satisfy you, what used to bring you pleasure, all it's doing is bringing you pain. And it's time to do something different. Here's another one. We want what we want now. You might not have any idea what you really want because the toddler's still in you on some level. You might have no idea what you want, but you know you want it now, right? I get this probably 1,000,000 times a day, especially this weekend, and it's a line, and it sounds easy, but it is complicated, and it's coming from a person about this tall, and you know what it is? They say, I'm hungry. And I say, well, what do you want? And they say, yes. And I say, I'm leaving. These little people don't have any idea what they want, and some of us big people don't have any idea what we want, but we know we want it now. And here's the truth. What we want now is not what we always want later. And I bet every one of you in here could tell a story of somebody. Maybe it's even yourself. You had to have that relationship, or they had to be in that relationship. They had to have that car, or you had to have that house, or you had to have that job, or you had to have that opportunity. And you poured all of yourself into getting it, and now you're staring something or someone in the face that you realize you didn't really want in the first place. What we want now is not always what we want later. What we want today sometimes can get in the way of what we want tomorrow. And I bet some of us get pinged with this, at least on a monthly, when that credit card bill comes, or that mortgage payment comes, or that car note comes, or whatever it is that comes that reminds you that you went after something that you really didn't want in the first place. And so the tension that comes when we don't get what we want, it really comes from us wanting our own way, from us wanting to be satisfied, and from us wanting what we want now. And James is showing us that all the tension that we experience in our relationships, all the conflict, it really boils down to us not getting what we want. It boils down to us wanting our own way, and he says it like this, and fighting for it deep inside ourselves. But listen to what he says in verse 2. He says, you desire, but you do not have, so you kill. Track with me for a second. Before you're like, hey, that's not for me. I'm not a murderer. I didn't never commit homicide. And frankly, I'm not willing to do that for anything. Just track with me for a minute. James is not writing to people on death row. He's not writing to people who have committed homicide or run the risk of committing homicide. He's writing to people like you and I that have wants, desires, and expectations. We meet the criteria of person that James is writing to. He throws that in there. He's using what we call hyperbole to wake up his audience. So if you fell asleep, wake up. It's weird for me to say, but whatever. If you're sleeping, you can do whatever you want from here forward. I give you permission. But he's using this to wake up his crowd. If you fell asleep during James' sermon, this was the wake-up call. And what he's trying to show us, he's trying to show us the level of risk involved when our wants, our desires, and our expectations proceed out of control. When we get caught in the want cycle. When we get caught placing unreasonable expectations on people and things, on opportunities, on relationships, on whatever it may be, to deliver a level of satisfaction that no person or thing can truly deliver. If we're not careful, what James is saying is you can want something to death. And some of you might be right there today where you know something's missing in your life, and you're trying to fill the void, and you're convinced that you deserve it, and you're willing to do whatever it takes. You're willing to step on people to get a step ahead. You're willing to push people out of the way to get that promotion. You're willing to risk your integrity to get into that relationship because you feel like you want something. You have to have it. And in your mind, the ends always justify the means. And if that's not where you're at, I bet you know someone that wanted something so badly they killed it. I bet you know someone that was so overbearing, had such high expectations. They were so demanding that it killed a relationship that they were in. When the someone didn't live up to their expectations or demands. I'm going to go there. I think some of us had parents like this. And I think some of us run the risk of parenting like this, where we're so overbearing, our demands are so high, our expectations are so high. Our kids don't even know what to do under our care because frankly, they don't feel cared for. And eventually it just ruins the relationship. This happens when parents want something so bad for their kids, or they want something so bad from their kids that they're willing to do whatever it takes to get that something. And eventually it just ruins the relationship. It happens in marriages when a spouse puts such high demands and pressure and expectations on their partner in crime that eventually someone just leaves the relationship because there's too much pressure. The expectations are too high. No one can live up to that overbearing standard. Have you seen this? Have you seen this play out? I bet you might know someone whose wants and desires killed a college scholarship, killed a political campaign, killed a deal or a career, a reputation, or killed a future. Just all out killed their future. Look, here's the message that James is trying to get across clearly. If we're not careful, our strongest want can become our greatest weakness. If we're not careful, our strongest want can become our greatest weakness. If we're not careful, what we want can ruin the relationships that we say we're trying to build. But he continues and he says, you covet, but you cannot get what you want. And when James uses this word covet, he's not talking about like the intellectual coveting where you want to have something. He's talking about hot pursuit coveting, you going after what it is that you think you want, what it is that you desire, what it is that you think that you deserve. You've defined it as valuable enough to pursue, to go after, to pull out all the stops, to take all the risk, to push for it, to just not let anything get in the way of you getting what it is that you're convinced that you want. And what James is showing us is that what we want ultimately reveals what we value. What we want reveals what we value. And every time that I say I want something, in a way, I'm defining what I find to be valuable. I'm defining what I find to benefit me personally. And that's what we tend to focus on, is how that someone or that something is going to improve the quality of our lives. And if that's where I go, there's some things that I have to admit. Because I want my own way, because I want to be satisfied, because I want what I want now, ultimately what I have to admit is I'm kind of selfish and I'm kind of self-centered. And maybe you can relate. But when I want things that are only going to improve the quality of life for me, ultimately what I'm saying is what I value most is me. And there are times when I do that. And there are other times that what I want and what I desire is other focused. It's in the best interest of the people in my life. But a lot of times it's in the best interest of me. And that's called selfishness and self-centeredness. And frankly, every single time, my selfish ambitions, when they're alive, when I'm not checking them at the door, they end up sabotaging my good intentions. Look, when we say that we want something, ultimately we're defining what's valuable to us. So what do you value? Do you value the people in your life or what you can get from the people in your life? Do you value your spouse or what you can get from your spouse? Do you value your kids or what you can get from your kids? What do you value? What do you want? Are you building a resume or are you building relationships? Look, here's another big challenge that I have. Just because I value something doesn't even mean that it's valuable. I can place value on things that have no value whatsoever. Listen to what James says. He says, you covet, but you cannot get what you want. That thing that you think you really want, that opportunity that you think is going to move your life so much further ahead, or that relationship that you think is going to fill the void and change everything for you, the someone or the something is never capable of delivering that level of satisfaction. And what ends up happening is it causes tension, and you end up quarreling, and you end up blaming, and you end up saying things like, if it weren't for her, or it weren't for him, or if it weren't for my boss, or if it weren't for my job, or if it weren't for my neighborhood, if it weren't for whatever it is, you're blaming, you're saying my life would be markedly better, my life would be markedly different. Look, it's one thing. It is one thing to get out your little journal and jot things down, and maybe you have your eyes on a relationship. And it's one thing to write your first name, and then you chase it with his last name, and then you giggle inside, and you're like, that's so cute. I can just be Miss So-and-so. Or it's one thing for you, gentlemen, to do the same thing, and you write down her name, and you match it with your last name, and you're like, this is going to be amazing. Match made in heaven. All I need is you. It is another thing to deal with their bad breath in the morning, the way that they don't wipe the toothpaste off of the sink, or they leave their dirty laundry in the corner. It's another thing to deal with their bad spending habits, or to really work out the things that have to be worked out in the context of marriage or any human relationship. It's one thing to pick a baby name. It is a whole nother ball game, a whole nother league altogether to raise that child, your sweet something or another, through middle school, through adolescence, through bad decisions. Look, what I'm really saying here is we can become so distracted by the concept of what we want. We really become blind to what we're asking for. Because here's what I know about me, and here's what I think I know about you. We want something that will satisfy us, but we are stuck wanting for things, relationships, opportunities that will never satisfy us because they can't. And I'm convinced that most of us, if we really spend enough time thinking, we would conclude we don't even know what we really want. And what ends up happening is we just get distracted and kind of like cornered by our momentary wants and desires. And what we end up doing is navigating through an endless list of wants and desires. And these can be relational, these can be experiences, things that you buy, things that you wear, things that you drive, things that you do, things that you consume. And ultimately, we can accumulate and accrue everything on every wants list ever made known and never be truly satisfied. But I am convinced that it does not have to be this way. We don't have to be trapped in the want cycle. So check this out. And you'll miss it if you're not paying attention, but this is huge. I need you to hear this. James goes on to say, you do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Look, I've always wanted something that will ultimately satisfy me, but we always want for things that will never satisfy us. Look, James is showing us that we run the risk of wanting things today that we want for no other reason than some degree of momentary pleasure. We're wanting for the next fix is all we're doing, and that's what James is talking about. But if you look a little bit closer, there's something else that James is showing us. There's something else that we need to see if we want to break the want cycle in our lives and move forward and make better decisions and have less regret. And here's what it is. We see that God himself refuses to let us settle. He refuses to give us what we want because he wants so much more for us. Do you know that God wants more for you than you could ever want for yourself? And he's not willing to let you settle for things or relationships or possessions or experiences or opportunities that can never satisfy you on that level. Listen, hear this. This is important. When God doesn't give us what we want, you know what he's doing? He's creating room in our lives for what we need. When God doesn't give you or I what I want, he is creating space. He's creating room in our lives to give us exactly what we need. That's how much God loves us. God is not interested in giving us the next fix. He is intent upon delivering ultimate fulfillment. Can I get an amen? Look, God is not trying to get something from us. He has something for us. He wants to break the want cycle in our lives. He wants to end the endless trap of wants and desires that will never satisfy us. He wants to give us something that will bring forth ultimate satisfaction in our lives. Look, what we want reveals what we value, but I'll tell you something else. Until we discover what's most valuable, we will have no idea what we really want. Until we discover what's most valuable, we will have no idea what we want. And this, my friends, is why Jesus came. I'm going to tell you why Jesus came. Jesus came to help us discover what's most valuable. Jesus came to help us, you and I, discover what's most valuable. And he did so by coming face to face with this simple yet complex question of what do you want? Now let me show you, because there's a part in Jesus' story where he's closing in on the end of his days. He knows that his life is coming to a close, and he's in a garden called Gethsemane, and he's struggling. He's talking to God, and he's wrestling through what he's about to face. He's wrestling through all the tension, all the conflict that he is personally experiencing. And in the final hours, Jesus was given a cup that he did not want to drink from. And here's what he prayed. He said, Father, if there's any other way to get this done, let this cup pass from me. Jesus was saying, I don't want this. I don't want what I currently have now. I don't want to drink from this cup. The cup that was full of the wrath of God that you and I deserved. The just punishment for our sin that we've committed against God and the people in our lives. He drank it. But do you see how he struggled to drink it? He was trapped. He was caught between what he wanted and what God wanted. Have we not been there? Some of us are there right now. You're trapped between what you want and what God wants. Know this, it's hard. It's a struggle. And it's okay. It's okay to bring that struggle to people in your lives that you trust. It's okay to bring that struggle to the context of your small group. It's okay to work through that struggle. You don't have to stay stuck. And here's what Jesus said. And here's how I know that he struggled. Because when he prayed, he said, if there is any other way, I don't want this. If there's any other way, let's do it another way. But then he said, if I have to drink it down, I will. If I have to struggle, I'll struggle. If I have to go to the cross, I'm going to the cross. If I have to cry, I'll cry. If I have to be scorned and abused, I'll be scorned and abused. If I have to be mocked, I'll be mocked. If I have to be alone, I'll be alone. If I have to struggle, I'll struggle. And then we hear him saying this. We hear him saying, not what I want, but what you want, Father. Look, Jesus came to give us what we really want. And I'll just say this, there's not a soul that's ever drawn breath that wanted Jesus in that moment. Jesus was the one that was absolutely and utterly rejected so that we could be accepted. He was unwanted so that we could get what we really wanted. That deep level, unperishing, never gonna go away satisfaction. Look, is there anybody in this room that has what they really want? Like you've arrived. You have absolutely everything you need and you're just so deeply satisfied that when you see Jesus delivering the deepest level of satisfaction that can be delivered, you're just like, hard pass, I'm good on that. Is there anybody here that's there? Because I don't know that I'm there. I'd love to be there, but I don't know that I'm there. Is there anyone in this room that can say with conviction that you're living free of guilt or free of shame? That your guilt and your shame is so far behind you, you're so healed and recovered from that you're not dealing with it anymore, that your regret and your shame and your guilt isn't keeping you up at night anymore, it's not knocking on your door when you least expect it to show up. Know this, regret and shame and guilt every single time is gonna leave you wanting things that can never satisfy you. It's gonna make you try to find a deep level of significance in things, in relationships that only ever leave you feeling insignificant. Look, Jesus was where we are. He was trapped between what he wanted and what God wanted. And when he carried that 80-pound crossbar, the distance that he carried it, to the untrained eye, it just looked like he was carrying a piece of wood that he was gonna hang on. But if you know Jesus, know this, that he was carrying every ounce of your guilt and your shame. He was carrying every ounce of your sin. He was taking everything that you didn't want so that you and I could have what we really wanted. Because in Jesus and in Jesus alone can we find ultimate value. In Jesus and in Jesus alone, we can find ultimate satisfaction because Jesus is the only one who can give us what we really want. Let's pray. Jesus, let us never cease to be amazed by how much you love us. You love us so much that you refuse to give us what we want. You love us so much that despite the fact that we want for things that'll never satisfy us the way that you can, you love us anyway. And Jesus, I pray that we would make a transition today, that you'd help us to see the areas of our lives where we have want that will never bring forth fulfillment, that will never bring forth satisfaction. I pray that you would reveal those things to us. Help us to get honest about the lives that we're living and the wants that we have and the desires that we have. And Jesus, show us that what we really want can only be found in you. Jesus, we love you. Amen.